Hello, Smart Money Tree podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's show. My name's Kirk Chisholm, and I'll be your host. So today I'm joined with Kaitlyn Laney. How you doing, Kaitlyn?
I'm good. How are you, Kirk? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, doing great. Doing great. Glad to have you in the show. Tell us a bit about your background before we begin.
Yeah. So, for those of you listening, I'm a certified financial advisor here in Scottsdale, Arizona. I run the Scottsdale Trek Wealth branch. I've been a financial advisor for, gosh, since 2010. In 2018, I left the big firms and started my own office, which was scary, crazy, and exciting, but has given me a lot of freedom to be the mom and the wife that I wanted to be. So now, personally, I'm married and we have two little boys that is 2 and 10 months. So we have two kids under two and running a business. It is busy.
Yeah, two boys. I remember those ages. It's kind of like having five girls at that age. They're just like little bear cubs wrestling around all the time. I don't know.
It,
They
it
will
is
be.
cr- it is crazy. Right? It's like a constant circus. And we have a dog, a puppy. So you throw a puppy and the boys in the mix, and I'm to the point where I'm just like everybody outside.
Yeah, puppy's like another boy. I got two boys as well, so they're a little bit older. So I've been through many stages. It's a great age, though. At that age, they're so innocent, and
It
before they
is
get a little too crazy.
It is so sweet. It kind of vacillates between like cuddling on the couch with mom to, you know, dumping toilet paper down the toilet. So,
Well, that's where it goes, right? This is
yeah, that
the
is
whole
true.
role.
It is true. We're on the right track.
Nice, awesome. So, yeah, so you've been doing this for a little while. What have been the biggest challenges you've seen in our industry?
I think the biggest challenge that I see is everybody needs different things. And I think, some of these big firms that I had the privilege of working at, which were amazing and great training ground, tend to provide vanilla basic advice, which is great and okay for folks just starting out. But as your wealth grows, as your situation grows and your taxes grow, it really gets to a point where you need a surgeon, you don't need a general practitioner anymore, and you outgrow your advice. So the biggest thing that I see in my world is folks have been given bad advice for too many years. I'll give you a perfect example. Guy out of Seattle calls me. He's been with Ed Jones for a bit, and he's making $450,000 a year, and he's been putting money into a Roth IRA for the past 5 years or more. And you can't make over $80,000 and add to a Roth IRA. Those are big issues. And so I think there's just a lack in general in our industry of personal financial planning and a plan that's going to help set people up for success, because advisors are not compensated to ask those questions. They're compensated to gather assets and manage money. And so sometimes I see that as a conflict of interest for doing not only what's right, but also what people need.
Yeah, yeah, the Roth is an interesting one. I think a lot of people misunderstand the Roth, and it's got a good sales pitch, but running the numbers, it actually comes out different than a lot of people think. What should I mean, if somebody can't contribute to a Roth, what should they be thinking about?
Again, everyone's situation is going to be different. I would say the questions that I ask folks when they come and sit down with me is do you know how much you're making? Number one. And do you understand how taxes work? So we really focus from a place of education and helping people understand where they're at. Once if you're in a marginal tax bracket, so the last dollar you make, that's what you're taxed at. If you're in a 22, 26 and higher percent tax bracket, that's a lot of money on every dollar you're making, you're giving away. So how can we shield some of that money into something like a 401k? Or if you're a business owner, we can open up something like a solo 401k or a SEP IRA. There's a whole lot of different vehicles that we can discuss and talk about. But again, it all is going to focus on what is your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? When do you need this money? And if your goal is to save as much on taxes as possible, starting with a retirement plan where we can shield some of that money is a really great option.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about retirement in a minute, but I mean, let's talk about the day-to-day stuff. I mean, it's great to save for retirement, but we were talking about before the show about the cost of childcare.
hmm
Um, I've been through that. We had many conversations around that, but how do you look at expenses like that? How should people be thinking about that expense?
It is, it's so challenging, especially as a mom. I think one thing that I encourage my clients to think about is seasons of life. When you have young kids, you're in an expensive season. Saving as much as you can for retirement or maxing out your retirement, vehicles, it just logistically might not be an option for you. And that's okay. We have time to catch up later. But right now, we just sometimes need to be blocking and tackling. So my husband and I spent $14,800 on childcare for one toddler, and our infant is home. With my husband, and my mother-in-law. So we don't even have childcare for the infant. That's just one kid. That's more than the tuition for ASU. So the tuition for ASU right now for a full year is 12,600, somewhere in there. And so when we talk about childcare, the first 5 years is really expensive until they get into kindergarten. And then if they go to public school, it's free. So one of the things that I encourage my clients to think about is, those first 5 years, okay, we're scraping by, we're getting those bills handled. But once your child starts kindergarten, keep that habit up. If you were paying $1,000 a month, switch that $1,000 a month to go into an account for your kids' college now. And so you don't feel that loss of income because you've already been paying it. And that's a great way to front load the cost for college down the road. And there's a number of different great accounts that we can do that for. But that's a great trick that I encourage a lot of people to think about is, whatever that bill is you're paying once a month, when it goes away, just shift that into an account for your kids so it's there when you need it.
Yeah, I remember, I mean, I used to live in the city. I mean, said ASU is cheaper than childcare. I guess it's a different kind of childcare, I guess. But when my kids were younger, I was in the city and I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and she was trying to decide whether to put her kids in daycare or to stay home. Um, and the numbers basically worked out where she would have to pay a full-time nanny the same amount as she was making in her job. So
Mhm.
why would you pay someone else to raise your kids? There's no net benefit to that. So it's easier just to stay home. Like,
We talk a lot, and my husband decided to stay home in January for that exact same reason. We ran the numbers, and from an after tax perspective, we were basically paying for him to work. Um, a nanny didn't really work for us because of our how close in age our kids are. I wanted my son to just get out of the house, have his own world, while we could focus on the baby without causing too many jealousy issues. So my husband stays home with the baby, and Landon, the 2-year-old, goes to childcare. But again, I have that conversation with a lot of couples that come and see me, especially teachers, folks that are making under 50,000. A full-time nanny right now is 35 to 38,000. So if you're making $50,000 a year after taxes, you're basically breaking even. And again, if you love your job and that's what brings you joy to get out of the house, great. Most people I talk to, they want to be home with their kids. They're working to provide for their kids. So if it's a net even and they're not going to miss any money really when you do the math, that was my husband. He goes, "Why am I spending time teaching and coaching other people's kids when I would rather be with my own, at least for the first few years?" And it's a huge problem in our economy because the more all the research says, all the economic data says, the more expensive childcare becomes, the more people are going to be leaving the workforce, but especially women. So, when we think about the strength of our economy, it is vitally important that we start really focusing on how can we help empower families to handle childcare.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that trade-off that women make because I see this a lot where women have a choice to make. They can either stay home with the kids or they can go to work. And it's not always women. In your case, it's your husband. But, for a large number of women, they feel that draw
Mhm.
to stay home with the kids versus going to work. So talk through like what that's like. Like, what's the decision-making process like when you're considering staying home versus going to work?
It was really, really hard. I think one of the things that my husband and I talked about at length was, and again, we were married for 6 years before we had children, but it was okay, if we're going to have children, we want them to be with us more than other people. For me, I didn't want to have children to have other people raise them. Again, not everybody has that option. You know, we're fortunate enough where my career can support my husband staying home. And so that for me, I was very grateful. Landon didn't start daycare until 15 months, until he was down to one nap a day. So a lot of it was sleep. You know, even the top daycares that I toured, the kids just don't get as great of sleep as they do at home. That's just my personal observations. A nanny was an option, but again, a nanny was going to be more money than my husband was making. So it was kind of like, do we do daycare, which I don't feel like is a great fit for the first 12 months? Or do we hire a nanny and pay for my husband to work? And ultimately, my husband made the decision to step away from his career and be home full time with our kids, which has been such a blessing, not only for our kids, but then he can hold our life together. He can help with groceries and laundry and food and all of the day-to-day household tasks that really add up. When you add everything together, it allows me to candidly make a lot more money because I'm not worried about the groceries and the every day-to-day stuff. He takes that off of my plate. And so if I can focus my time on revenue generating activities for our family and then come home and be mom, it's really opened up my world. And so, and for a lot of men are in my role, right? And so that's the thing with men too, is, you know, hey, if your wife can hold down the fort at home, how many things is that going to take off of your plate to allow you to be more focused and make more money? Um, Again, everybody's situation is going to be different. It was one of the hardest decisions that we made, but ultimately, I'm like, you know what? I don't need a new car. I don't need a $10,000 Chanel purse. I don't need a lot of the things that our society is focused on consuming. And so when you know, I don't get Botox, I don't do a bunch of spa days. Like we just keep a lean budget and focus on what's important to us, which is for the first 5 years, we are on for our kids. And I want to try to end my day at 3 o'clock every day. That doesn't mean I don't turn on my laptop at like last night. I was working from 9 to 11:30 or midnight. I work a lot because I want to be a present mom and I want to make a lot of money so I can afford to have my husband with our kids more than other people.
You feel like you're missing out on a lot of those moments by working?
For sure. I mean, but it's a trade-off, right? There's no life that exists without innate frustrations and without a trade-off. And there's a lot of times that I'm sad, you know, my husband's taking our boys to the zoo and I have a lunch meeting across town. I would love to stop in and be with the zoo. Um, and so it's not with a lot of heartache for sure. And I have to remind myself that this is the life I have created. This is the life that I wanted and still want. But I think that brings up a great point is, you know, Max and I, for us, we get lunch together probably about once a week. He'll come to my office, he'll bring lunch, just him and I. And we ask each other, hey, is this still working? Are you still happy? You know, what's not working, what's working. Once a week, we kind of have those recalibration sessions. And I really try to block off my calendar Friday afternoon. So every Friday I pick up Landon. So again, I think in life there's give and take. You know, I'm curious, you know, when you had your young boys, you know, how did you and your partner think through that?
Yeah, it was difficult for my wife. She had a job for a commercial real estate company, and she decided to stay home with the boys, and it was a great decision for her. But now she's going back to work a few years ago, and she's working, and she feels like she's like 10 years behind. Like all
Mhm.
her friends were 10 years ahead of her, and she's like, I'm starting like I was not out of college, but she's like, I'm way behind where I should be professionally, and it sucks. And and I feel for her, but I have to constantly remind her. I said, yeah, but you had all the time with our boys, and I was working all the time, so I missed that. And I had, like you, we have two boys, and I know my time to them is more valuable when they're of a certain age because they need a dad at a certain age. Like when they're younger, it's they love them, they love their mom. I mean, nothing wrong with that. But I mean, like at a certain age, they need like a dad presence to
Yeah.
really give them that piece of life. And I knew that was going to be important at a certain age. So my vision was I'm going to put in a ton of work up front
Mhm.
when they're younger, when they didn't need me as much, and I would certainly give up that time with them, which, I think back, I'm like, I wish I had that back, but like you said, life's trade-offs. I have that time with them now. So I'm driving them to hockey games a few times a week. I'm driving them practice, picking them up from school. I don't mind doing it. 1 second. I get time in the car with them, valuable time. I can talk with them, have conversations, like, be a parent. Like it's great. Um, but I had to make that decision early on.
Mm.
And I think it's hard. A lot of people don't think about it that way, but I reflected a lot of my childhood and how I was raised, and I thought about things I wanted and didn't want, and it was like, all right, I'm going to be very purposeful at a certain age in their life, and that's what I did. And so I knew what I had to give up, and I was willing to do it. And you know, like I said, my wife's she's sad that she's behind in professionally, but I mean, what's another few years at some point? I mean, you're going to work till you don't, and then, you know, unless you're going to be CEO, it's it's okay. It's
Yeah.
I think for her, it's not necessarily about the money. It's more about the job and the uh, personal professional growth that she's getting. And I mean, she's doing great work, but I feel her pain from feeling like she deserves more than she's getting. And it's not that and they treat her well. It's just if you're only there for a certain amount of time, you can't get that benefit. So, there's no easy answer, and I think it's harder on women because it's not that men don't stay home and do that, but I think, in my opinion, women are wired differently than men, obviously, and men are wired differently from women, and so there's a certain aspect of um, things that I'm maybe more willing to accept. Um, and the mom role I think is really important when they're young. Um, and for boys, and I'll just speak for boys because I don't have girls, but the dad role is really important when they're older. So you never know what you're going to get. Every kid's different, but I think for us, we played it right, and
Yeah, and,
and it
and I
works.
totally agree with you. And that's where, if Landon gets home from school at 3 and he goes down at 7:38, that's not that much time in the evenings. If I don't get
Yeah,
home till 6 o'clock at night, that's what, 2 hours with him a day. That never felt right for me. And that was candidly one of the big reasons I left my VP title is I was working 7 a.m. to 6:30 at night. I was working my tail off. Now, granted, I was in President's Circle. I was like top in the country, all the VP titles and fancy things. It was great. I was managing like 480 million. All the things on paper sounded amazing. My husband and I had just gotten married. We had just bought this big house. And I turned to him and I said, this isn't the life that I want. I don't see how kids fit into this. I don't see how I can be the mom I want to be and be present for our kids and have this crazy job. Like, what are we going to do? He was a teacher. It's not like his salary is going to pay our mortgage at all. So, we started manifesting, we started praying, we started talking about like, what do we need? And in my head, I had created this false narrative because I was working with clients 2 to 20 million at the time, which I still do today. And I created this false narrative, which was, I'm 28, 29 years old. If I leave this big brand, and I go independent, are wealthy people going to still work with just little old me? And that was such a disservice to myself. If I could go back 10 years and talk to her and say, absolutely not, age is not a definition of success. People are going to hire you for your heart and for your brain. And that has been the case. And so it was a God thing. I kind of got forced out of that role, which at the time was very scary. And I thought, okay, well, I guess this is the time to start my own business. And if it doesn't work, we can always sell the house. That was always my fallback plan. Not a great one, but it makes you feel better. And in 2018, I did. And it was a lot of networking events, a lot of speaking engagements. And here we are, gosh, over 5 years later, and we've built $100 million office that has low fees, comprehensive planning, and takes care of people. And I can create the hours that I want to be the mom that I wanted to be. But it was a lot of faith, a lot of really scary, big decisions. And thankfully, I married a partner that was behind me every step of the way, and it worked out because we had a vision, and that vision was how can we create a world where I can be a mom and a really good financial advisor to the people that need me.
yeah. No, that's great. I appreciate that. I think it's one of the reasons I got in this industry is because, it allowed, I mean, frankly, even though my wife was spending most of the time with the kid, I was working from home a lot. So I
Yeah.
was around. Like I
Mhm.
wasn't, I always wanted to be around the kids. Like I had to obviously work and I was on the phone all the time, but like, I'd see them once in a while. They'd come in, get a hug. I always tell them you can't come in unless you need a hug. You can always come in for a hug, but you
Oh, I
can't
love
disturb.
that. I'm stealing that.
Yeah, yeah. It's like that's the only rule. Like when the doors close, daddy's working. Unless you need a hug, then you can come get one. So, that worked well. But I was never that far from them. But you're not present because you're working.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's something I kind of missed. But yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's part of who we all are and it makes us who we are, and it's nice to be able to combine work with personal life, and it makes it worth it, right? Because this industry allows you to be more flexible. You don't have to show up at your desk at 9 to 5, and that's not something I ever wanted. Like
Yeah.
my dad was an attorney. He was always around, and I wanted to be around for my kids. And
Yeah,
I think,
my mom ran her own business too. And if she had been a nurse, and she told me she was working for Stanford at the time in their children's like infectious disease, like some crazy cases at Stanford. Because I remember asking my mom, like, hey, you're at every softball game, you're at all these things. How did you do that? She goes, well, when I was a nurse in my early and late 20s, she had me at 31. I saw that I was going to miss every other Christmas. I was going to miss Thanksgiving. I was going to have to work night shifts. As a nurse, you don't have a choice. You're in the union, you have all these things. But if I started my own business with this plastic surgeon and I opened up this wound and ostomy clinic, I could be a nurse, I could help patients, and I could make it to all of your girls' stuff and be your Girl Scout leader. And so my vision was I knew I wanted to be a mom more than anything, but I knew I had to make a lot of money to live in this beautiful Bay Area lifestyle house in California, which is where we're from. And the only way I saw vision to do that was to own it myself. And so my mom was a really great role model and helped me ask those questions. And so for people listening, where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 18 months? And are the decisions you're making today setting you up for that life? And go big. We only have one life. And be specific. For me, I wanted to be able to do really big things with my family and not worry about the cost or not choose between hockey and baseball, which are very expensive, right? So, I knew that I wanted to put ourselves in a financial position to not have to make hard choices, but also be there for my kids. And that's where being a business owner was the natural fit for me, but not without a lot of stress and late nights.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, let's fast forward into like retirement, because I want to talk about that a little bit before we wrap it up. How should people be thinking about retirement? I mean, there's so much. You get to a certain age, what age do you retire? You got to deal with Social Security, Medicare. There's so much to deal with in retirement.
Mhm.
How should people be thinking about that conversation?
So let's start with the basics, just numbers. Social Security and Medicare, what is that? So, Social Security is something you pay into, Kirk, as you know, from your paycheck every single year. And when you are 62, you have the option to start Social Security. Um, every year you wait, it goes up. I think right now it's 7% up until full retirement age, which for most listening is going to be 67. If you're still working, you cannot turn on Social Security before 67 without paying it all back. You're penalized. So the ages to know, the numbers to know is for retirement is 62, your full retirement age, 67 for most, and 70. And then the other piece is 65 is when you can get government health care. I have a lot of clients that have enough money to retire tomorrow, but their health is really, really poor and they need access to good health care. And so because they're not 65 yet, the risk of retiring and losing their health care benefit is too great. So they're continuing to work to ensure that they have access to Mayo and some of those things. So when we're talking about retirement, again, it is so important to work with a financial advisor that's going to sit down and understand what are your goals, what's going on health wise, what's going on tax wise, and know those numbers. So great, and don't do it alone. I think that's one of my biggest business beliefs is nobody gets to where they want to go in life alone. We all need help, and really search and find somebody who's going to be on your team. And a great question when you're interviewing an advisor is talk to me about Social Security and how does it fit in? Google it beforehand, know the answers, and make sure they know their stuff. Because Social Security is going to play a big role. And I know for me, I don't believe Social Security is going to be there. I think it'll be taxed away, means tested. And so our financial plan is if we get Social Security, great, wonderful bonuses, but are we relying on it in our plan? Absolutely not. We're saving in other vehicles. And so when we think about retirement, it's number one, what season of life are you in? You know, we don't want to go into credit card debt because you're maxing out your 401k and you can't afford childcare. So, season of life, what can you afford? What is your tax situation? And how can we set up different buckets in terms of automating your investments and savings while balancing out a realistic life and plan?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. That's really important. Um, cool. So, any kind of final thoughts as we kind of wrap it up here?
You know, there's something called a relationship timeout with your financial advisor. It's a really great strategy to just sit down and make sure that A, you're still on the same page, they're still the right person for you, and you haven't outgrown them. So that's something to consider. There's a couple questions that you can ask your financial advisor. But what it sounds like is you call your advisor up and say, hey, I'd like to have just kind of a regroup meeting where we recalibrate and we make sure that we're on the same page. I call it a relationship timeout, where you sit down and you say, okay, what are your services? Let's review your services. Let's review, the fees, and what is the plan for me moving forward? And am I on track to meet my goals? And before that meeting, have an idea of what your goals are in the short, near, and long term. And so if you focus on services, fees, and the plan for your goals, those three components for that meeting, you're going to walk out of that meeting having a gut feeling of, okay, yeah, this is my person for the next 5 to 10 years, or, oh, that didn't quite go like I had hoped. I feel like I'm not getting enough personalized, actionable, real advice that I can actually use in my day to day life. I might need to start interviewing somebody else. And so that is a really good tip that the sooner you do something like that, the sooner your money and your life is going to be working better for you.
Awesome. Well, Caitlin, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Where can people find more about you?
So you can go to my website, mytrekwealth.com. You can book a complimentary call. We work with clients all over the country. We specialize in tax mitigation and making sure you have a good plan to set you and your family up for success. So, Kirk, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's always fun to come and share some tips and tricks with folks.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us, Caitlin.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Hey, Doug, did you hear? We're giving away free money. Well, I'll tell you about it in a minute, but before I do, there's a saying in the mining community, well, precious metals mining, that is. The saying is that if you want the best deals, you have to be in the room. Now, you're probably thinking, what does it mean to be in the room? Well, I'll tell you. Being in the room means that you're on the short list of people who get invited to be a part of the best deals. These are the deals that most investors will never have access to. You mean like IPOs? Nope, IPOs are chump change. Those are for retail investors, small potatoes. That's nothing compared to these deals. These deals would have you salivating to get access to them. Once you know they exist, you will never look at investing the same way again. I almost don't want to even tell you that they exist because it will ruin your thinking of how the investing world really works. Now, you might be excited that these deals exist, but you only have access to the deals if you're an insider, or in the room as they call it. Now, as loyal listeners to the show, I'm going to give you a chance to be in the room. Money Tree Investing Podcast has created the Insiders Club. This is a community of our show's members who are loyal listeners of the show and want to get more out of their investing experience. Being a part of the Insiders Club gives you insider status for upcoming events and webinars, discounts, free stuff and books, and influence on the future direction of the show. This is a great opportunity to join us as we expand our content and services. Oh, and did I mention free money? Yes, in the next few weeks, I'll be giving away free money to our members of the Insiders Club as my appreciation for listening to the show. Now, there's no cost to join the Insiders Club. Just go to moneytreepodcast.com/free money today to join the community. That's www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money. I hope to see you in the room.
All right, that was a great interview with Kaitlyn. Really appreciate her coming on the show. Now we're into the panel portion of the show where we have our very own Barb Freeberg. Hey, Barb.
Hi, so happy to be here, and hopefully I'll get to talk about my kid.
Yeah, you absolutely will. And we also have our own Phil Weiss. Hey, Phil.
Hey, Kirk, I'm also happy to be here. And I got four kids to talk about, so let's do it.
All right, good time. So, Barb, what were some of your takeaways from the interview?
I really resonated with the big time decisions when you're first starting out. And when my husband and I were first starting out, before we had kids, we lived in California. We were living on one income, and my husband was in graduate school. So it was my income. And we did not have a lot of money. I mean, you should have seen our first apartment. The carpet was disgusting. And what we did was we began contributing to my 401k at my work then. We couldn't afford to contribute to it, and sometimes we went way over budget and dipped into what little savings we had, but we had a commitment to do that. Then, flash forward a couple of years, we had a child, and I was working, my husband was working, and we lived in California, Southern California. Newsflash, if you have not lived on the coast, you have no idea how expensive it is. And so we made a bold decision. We said, we're moving to the Midwest. My husband got a job in the Midwest. I stopped working for a few years so I could stay home with my child. We lived in the Midwest, a wonderful family environment. Flash forward decades. Our child is an adult. We're back in California. And those sacrifices that we made, and really they were sacrifices, but we habituated to them, have made all the difference now that we are facing retirement. It's like smoothing your income out over your working life to the point where you can have a really decent sized retirement fund makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Phil, what about you? What are some of your takeaways?
I love the whole idea, the concept of starting early that she talked about. Just the idea that you can start, as Barb said, when you have kids. I know I didn't because I had a lot of other things that got me. I ended up paying for college with credit card debt and my rent when I was in college with credit card debt. So I had to pay that off first. And I didn't know that what I should do because I didn't have those lessons coming up. So it's so important for us as parents to educate our kids because they can benefit. And so many people forget, like, you work your whole life and you're putting this money away, and then they get to retirement. I'm like, well, what am I going to live on? Well, it's not just Social Security. If you put money away, you're going to pay yourself back. Like all that money that you saved, that's put there so that you can get a stream of income when you retire. It makes a big difference. I like to call that a retirement paycheck. But it's really important that if you can do this, you put this money away so that then when you retire, you can have some money coming in. And you don't want to just live on Social Security because you're not going to be able to do very much. I mean, Social Security is nice, but it's not something that most of us can live on. And if you want to do things in your retirement, you have to plan ahead and you have to take these steps now and be proactive. And that was the most important message I think that I took from from the whole interview.
Yeah, no, it's I agree. So let me ask this. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of planning that we can do throughout our lives to make things more smooth in the, life stages are challenging and certainly getting more so than they were maybe 50 years ago, where the middle class had more of a somewhat comfortable existence, where things are a lot harder for people economically. What are some things that people can do to make that better, Barb?
Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to educate yourself. So you want to understand a little bit about how money works. And you might want to hire a financial planner either for a couple of sessions or just start reading on your own. You want to start early. I don't care how old you are. You want to start saving for your future. You want to start doing the basics. Do not get credit card debt to pay for everyday expenses. So if you cannot live on what you make, then you really want to make some hard choices. And I know many people are in that situation today. You want to move to a lower cost of living area. You want to cut your expenses back. And you want to start saving in an IRA, a Roth IRA, a 401k, which is your workplace retirement account, and doing that and then having another account where you save for emergencies because they're going to come, and also intermediate term goals, which might be a vacation or it might be an addition to your house or whatever. And the best way to do this is you want to automate it. You want to have set up automatically out of your checking account or out of your salary. You want money transferred into a retirement account and into an emergency fund and maybe even into a intermediate money bucket.
Okay, cool. Phil, what about you? What are some things people can do to smooth that out?
So I love one of the things, a couple of things that I want to just expand on that Barb just talked about. First, if you have a workplace 401k, and I know sometimes money can be tight and it's really hard to contribute, but most companies give you a match. And think about it this way. The most common match is like put in 6% and they'll match 3%. Well, that's a 50% return on your money, right? Because if you put in 6% of your salary, you're going to end up with 9% of your salary in the account. So that's a 50% return. And when a company was making you an offer as to how much they were going to pay you, they assumed you're going to take that. So you're turning down money that the company was going to give you, and you're turning around this guaranteed 50% bump in the amount that you contribute. And as far as setting it up automatically, I call this paying yourself first, right? Take that money and never let it hit your checking account where you can spend it. Send it to a savings account, send it to a retirement account, send it to these different accounts, but also think about ways to supplement it. I know that during the call, we mentioned putting money into a Roth. Well, even if you have a workplace plan, you can still contribute to a Roth. If your income's $150,000 as a single person or $236,000 as a couple, that allows you to contribute to a Roth, or you can contribute to an IRA. And think about having different types of accounts. Don't make it all your taxable account. Don't make it all an IRA. Don't make it all a Roth, because you want to have different buckets to pull from, especially when you get older and you're starting to pull the money out, because we're trying to manage our tax rate. So there's a way to leverage this so that we can keep our tax rate down so that we don't have to pay the maximum all the way. That's why when we get older and we have people that we work with that we do Roth conversions and things like that, because we're trying to manage their tax rate. But all these things are really important. And Barb mentioned starting early. I was telling this story before we started. Now, as a financial advisor, I try to talk to my kids a lot about this stuff. And I have one of my sons, he did a co-op and an internship last summer, and he gave me money every time to put into, some of it went into his Roth IRA, some went into his brokerage account. Then one of his older brothers, when he started his job, I woke up one morning and I go in, or walked into my office one morning, I go into Schwab and I see that he fully funded his Roth IRA for the year. He didn't even ask me about it. And the same son, he's still on our healthcare plan because he's not yet 26 and it doesn't cost us anything extra and it saves him having to pay anything. So because he's part of a family health savings account eligible plan, he can contribute at the family level, not just the individual level, but at the family level, he can contribute to his HSA. So he's putting money in his 401k, he's putting money in his Roth, he's putting money in an HSA. We were in the car several months ago and I said to him, Daniel, someday I won't be here anymore, but you're going to sit there and you're going to remember me because you're going to either be going on these wonderful trips. You're going to retire early. You're going to be doing some kind of special things because you started so early. And it's all because of these lessons and these things that we talked about that got you started at a young age. And I think that's just really important. And our financial education in our country isn't very good. So as Barb said, educate yourself. And if you're not comfortable doing it yourself, find somebody that you can work with that can help educate you so that you can understand. Ask questions. Don't just take what they say and do it. Try to understand why.
Yeah,
You know
that's
what?
go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead, Barb.
I want to add something else in because many people are sold financial products by people you would think would know better. Maybe your financial planner at your bank or something like that. You have to understand how are they getting compensated and what is this costing me? So, all financial information is not good information. And so, if someone is selling you a product, a certain type of fund, a certain type of investment, which most of them have management fees. But if it has a management fee of 1% for a mutual fund, you want to think twice about that because you can get a total market index fund which gives you access to most of the stocks in the entire US and pay 0.03%, 3 basis points, which is like nothing. So you don't want to get caught having someone sell you an investment that has a high fee.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I appreciate that, Barb. What we'll get into the advisory stuff in a minute. What about childcare? I mean, when you were raising your kids, I think things certainly were a little different than when I raised mine, and even now. How should people be thinking about childcare? I mean, a lot of people don't want to have kids because they can't afford kids, and I'm pretty sure that was the case when we had our kids too. You couldn't afford them back then, but you did it anyway. So, how should people
Exactly.
be thinking about that?
That is so tough. And hopefully, there'll be coming some tax breaks to help you out with that. But I really, really liked what Kaitlyn said about analyzing how much benefit you're getting from two parents working. It may be financially smart to have one person stop working for 2 years because childcare is so expensive. And I mean, what can you do? You can maybe stagger your work hours. Some people can work from home. Again, I throw this out. This is like really maybe dramatic for some people, but you have to think about the cost of living in the area that you live in. Now, what we did when both my husband and I were working was we tried the childcare, the group childcare when she was a baby, and it didn't work for her. It just did not work. And so we did hire a nanny, a college student, and it was a lot of money back then. I'm not going to tell you how much because it sounds like nothing today, but it was a lot of money, but it was also time limited. By age 3, she's in group daycare a couple of hours a day. By age 5, she's in kindergarten, and many places have all day kindergarten. So you have to look at the childcare as this is a really limited time period, and you have to figure out ways for your family to get through it.
Yeah,
And
I think it's just real quick. I'll let you speak,
okay.
Phil. I think it's childcare is kind of this weird thing because we lived in the city of Boston and it's not cheap. It's not cheap anywhere in the Boston area, but it's definitely not cheap in the city. And I had a friend who was an advisor too. She went through this before I did, and we were talking about it. And she's like, "Yeah, we had." She's like, "Well, we had a choice. Either I could stay home, or I could pay someone money. It was like $75,000." To basically, as a nanny. It's like with benefits, 75 with benefits, we could pay some single person to be the nanny of this child. Um, and I was thinking about that and I was like, that's it. I I don't think I'd make that decision. Like because when you're younger, you're not really making a ton of money, right? You're when you're in your 30s, 20s, early 30s, you're not rolling in dough at that stage. So 75 is a lot. Um, but to make that decision, I mean, most people, it's easy to just say, well, I'm just going to keep one parent home because let's say that parent's making 75,000, so you're basically going to work to not raise your kid, you know. But the other side of that is my wife and I talk about this a lot, because because I worked through my kid's younger age because I needed to, and she stayed home. Um, she got to raise the kids, and now she's regretting that because she's like, well, now I'm so far behind professionally. I feel like I'm here with all the 30-year-olds. I'm at that level because I had to take a step back. I'm like, yeah, but you got time with our kids, and I had to work, and I missed that. Um, so you can't have it all. I don't know these women's livers that destroyed women's lives. Like you can't have it all. Sorry, you can't. It's not possible to have it all. And I'm not sure you should, right? I think life's about choices and figuring out what's most important to you. If you decide your job's most important, that's fine. If you decide your kids are most important, that's fine. Like there's no wrong answer. But you can't have it all. And so I think whatever you choose, there's going to be a regret on the other side of it. And I think that's just the decision has to be made. I made that choice. I would have loved to stay home with the kids, but someone had to pay the bills. And I missed that. My wife's like, "Oh, I remember that." I'm like, "No, I wasn't there. I was working. You were there." Like, I mean, I was around, but I wasn't like, I mean, she was with them every day, which I'm sure she could have used a break once in a while, but that's not the point. The point is it's a time in life that I think a lot of dads, because most dads are not home with the kids, most dads miss for better or worse. I mean, I know when my kids were really young and the grandfathers were around, they had no idea. Like they're around and they're sitting there like, oh, look at this. I'm like, you didn't spend any time with kids this age before, did you? You could totally tell they're just oblivious. They're like, oh, look at this little thing. Like, I don't know. It was a funny time to hear their comments and judgment when they weren't around for their kids at that age. But anyway, I know I'm not alone in that sentiment. Phil, what were you going to say? Sorry, I cut you off, but I had to share that.
No, I get it. And one of my favorite parts of the interview was when the two of you were talking and you were talking about when you take your kids to practice and stuff like that. And she was talking about like going back and have your hours, right? And because it's all about trade-offs. Like I remember when my kids were little, when I was an analyst, I worked out of my house for 7 years. And I had an office, the same office that I'm in now in my house. And my kids knew it was my office and they were really good. If the door was closed and they knew that I was busy, even when they were little, we got them to not interrupt. But it also afforded me, I mean, I coached my kids growing up in so many different sports. It was basketball, it was baseball, it was soccer. One year I even had to coach lacrosse because there was nobody else and I had experienced coaching, but I know nothing about lacrosse. So they gave me somebody that did. But the thing was that there were nights when I was in, like companies would release earnings and I had to get the report out. And if I didn't finish before I left for practice or game, I'd come home and eat dinner with my family. And then at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, I would, or sometimes 9 if we had a game, right? I would go back in my office and I would stay up as late as I needed to finish that report because that was the choice that I made. It gave me that time. Like, and our kids, they still travel with us. They're in college and some are done and they still travel with us as a family. And I think that a lot of that time that we spent together then when they were little is what allows us to have developed that bond as a family that allows us to stay together. So there's always choices that we have to make. It's hard. And you're right. Like my wife, she worked home for a long time. And so there were times both parents were working home, but the kids always had somebody around. And to spend $75,000 for a nanny so that you can go work to make a similar amount, like I don't understand why you would want to make that choice because there's just a lot that you miss out. And like I know I missed stuff too because I was working, but at least I had the opportunity to see and I could make some choices that allowed me to spend more time. And I think that's really important too.
Yeah, I mean, we all, like I said, we all have to make choices. I mean, everyone's choices are different. I mean, my choice was to forego time with the kids when they're really young, so I'd have more time with them now. And I have that time now, and I'm thankful for it because I have 2 boys, and they need me now more than they needed. They needed the mom, my wife. I didn't mean to call her the mom, but they needed my wife early, as most kids do, and they needed me more now. And I made that choice consciously before, and I missed it. It's a loss for me, but for the family, it was the best outcome because the kids need me more now than they needed me then. So, but like you, Phil, yeah, I was working from home, locked myself in the room. The kids knew, and and we had this rule, like you can't disturb daddy at work unless you need a hug. If you need a hug, you can always come in. If you need a hug, go come in. Daddy will give you a hug. But that's the only otherwise you have to stay out because daddy's working. And it was cute. So sometimes I did get hugs, but it's hard. It's hard to eat when you're at home because they're right there and it's challenging. But I don't know. We'll kind of wrap it up here. So Barb, final thoughts from you before we wrap it up.
I love this topic. I love this topic so much because my daughter is now an adult and she's benefited from these lessons. And don't get me wrong, we've had our rough times. And I have had my regrets about the choices that we've made, especially during the rough times. But as the mother of an adult child, and as someone who really, really sacrificed a lot in terms of lifestyle, career, whatever, when we were younger, I don't look at it as a sacrifice today. I look at it as making choices and then embracing those choices and making the choices to make sure not only is the now smart and good financially and for my family, but hopefully take the steps through financial management, family decision making to have a sound life throughout all the years and all the stages and accept the choices that you make. And my name is Barbara Friedberg. You can find me on YouTube or at Barbara Friedberg Personal Finance.
Great. Thanks, Barb. And Phil, final thoughts from you.
So Kirk, as you were telling that about your kids coming in and give you a hug, my favorite thing was my kids were allowed to come in when they got home from school and they would spend 5 or 10 minutes with me telling me about their day. And I get the big hug too. And I was happy that I could be here for that. But I think it's that this is all about choices and trying to live life without regrets. And that's really a big part of what I do because I work with people on life plans, and life plans are about helping you live your most fulfilled life and figuring out those things that matter most to you so that you can bring how you use I call it your team of resources, which is your time, energy, attention, and money. And you can align those with your values and what matters to you. And if you can do that, hopefully it's going to lead you to live a happier, more fulfilled life. So I'm Phil Weiss. My firm is Surprise Management, and I know that experiencing big life transitions can be stressful. My job is to help empower women facing new beginnings with the financial knowledge and tools they need to make self-assured decisions. As I said, my firm is Surprise Wealth Management. We'd love to get to know you. You can visit our website, which is Apprise Wealth, APPRISE wealth.com. And if you add a /5-things to it, you can also download a free copy of 5 Things Every Woman Should Know About Finances. Thanks for having me on today. I could talk about this topic all day long.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Phil. Thank you both. It's been fun chatting about this. That's the show for this week. Thank you again for joining us on Money Tree Investing Podcast. My name's Kirk Chisholm, wealth manager of Innovative Advisor Group. We don't just manage your wealth, we make your life better. You can find more about me at innovativewealth.com. And of course, you can find me every week here on this show. You can also check out our show at Money Tree Investing Podcast. On our website, you'll have access to the show notes, resources, and the archive shows. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel for immediate access to the new shows when they're released. When you subscribe to the show, it allows us to get access to some of the top minds of investing in personal finance. While you're here, please leave a comment and question if you want us to address it on the show. Have a great week ahead, and remember, no one will care about your money like you do, so invest in your life.